Park Flyer Podcast, Episode 1, Your First Aircraft.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Hi everyone, Michael here, and welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures and try to help the new guys get started in park flying. If this is your first time, thank you for joining us today, and if you're a return listener, then welcome back. I'm joined today by my co-host, Jay.
Hi everybody, this is Jay from the AK.
How goes it tonight?
It's going really well, even though there's a little bit of freezing temperatures out. We're doing okay up here.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear you're staying warm, actually.
Yeah, something like that.
Our topic for today is for the new park flyer out there, and it's basically we're going to talk about your first aircraft. I know searching for those planes that help you break into the hobby can be a little overwhelming, and there's a lot of choices out there, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely, Mike. But, you know, the new guy definitely falls into a couple of categories. There's the they want to have the biggest model that they see something that's really cool and they got to have it. There's the speed demon, type of guy who wants to have that plane that goes 100 miles an hour. And then you have the guy who doesn't want to listen to anybody and just buys whatever. So
yeah, I had one of those guys actually. A couple years back, we were out flying and this guy just shows up. He's got one of those Park Zone strikers, the gray got the tiger stripe ones. I mean, flat out of the box, the thing does what, 60, 70 miles an hour.
Easy on a 3-cell.
And yeah, and we were using like brush motors back then. Now they can modify it and it gets even faster. But anyway, he gets this thing out and I look at him and of course, I've got my little AMA instructor patch on and ask him if he needs help. No, I don't need any help. And He proceeds to launch this thing at wide open throttle, and not the way we're flying. We try to fly in a pattern and make a little box where we have a east-west type runway kind of set up. And this guy tosses it right across the runway, full throttle. That thing disappeared like a homesick angel, man. It just went out. And, of course, it was never to be seen again because it went into the neighborhood. He lost sight of it, and then now it's gone. And so I felt bad for the guy. We talked about it. He jumped in his car, drove around for like an hour, couldn't really find it.
And I'm sure
wouldn't you know?
I'm sure he was saying that, stupid airplane.
It's always the airplane's fault, right?
Always.
And, 2 weeks later, he shows back up. He's got a brand spanking new F-22.
Of course.
The guy's never flown. He's never flown. And so now he shows up with this EDF, and of course I walk over. Hey, how's it going? And we're doing great. And then,
well, let me interrupt you just for a quick second. So when did you learn that he had never flown before? When did that at least dawned on you that he had never flown?
Probably when he launched the thing right across the runway. I mean, it was very obvious that it wasn't really a runway; it's just a little patch of area where we fly, but. He just didn't, it's some of those things. You can kind of tell a new guy. He shows up, he's got the nice shiny, foam airplane, and he's all excited about doing, hey, everybody look at my new airplane, and, do you need help? No, I got it. You ever done this before? No. So that was the big hint right there is what you say, hey, do you have a lot of experience? No, I don't have any experience. Okay, well, that was the first red flag. The fact that everybody came running into behind their cars, that was a second red flag. They're all kind of get out of the way. And, the fact that he launched the thing at full throttle and it disappeared because he didn't really know how to control it. And that's really what happened to the F-22 as well. The F-22, had little wheels on it. And he decided that was a better way to do it. And it basically took off, and the F-22 pitched up in the air. He rotated way too soon, and it went left and right. He inverted and pulled it right in the ground, and foam went everywhere. So, it's just disturbing to watch guys that kind of get into the hobby and they get a little over their head. It's kind of disturbing. So what I would like to do tonight is to try and talk a little bit about what the first aircraft really should be. And I think we might go out to some of the parks and interview a couple of the guys, ask them what their first ones were. But I think the most important part is to have an EPP airplane.
Oh, absolutely. EPP is the miracle plane that's out there today. I mean, compared to what you could get, about 6 years ago when you started with the GWS style beer cooler foam type airplanes, where the minute they hit the ground, they would explode into like this confetti-like material and just scatter all across the field.
That was longer than 6 years ago, by the
All
way.
right, well, so time and me, not so
yeah,
good.
it's been like almost 15 now, but whatever. Who's counting, right?
Who's counting? Yeah, that was yesterday, right?
Seems, but I do understand what you're talking about. The beer cooler foam, that styrofoam stuff when it hit the ground. My very first airplane, believe it or not, was a cardboard box. I cut, part of the cardboard box, or the what do you call that stuff from Michaels? It's the foam board.
Foam board, yeah.
Yeah, so that was my very first park flying airplane. I mean, I started out on a glider, thanks to you, but that didn't seem to go very well. So I started building those, kind of more of a blue cord type stuff. But I went to Michael's and I bought that, that foam board stuff. I never peeled the paper off of it because nobody told me to do that. And so this thing weighed 1,000,000 pounds and, give or take an ounce. And it flew, but it didn't fly well, but it flew. And when I crashed it, it wasn't that big of a deal because it only cost me like $10, to get all the parts and everything. So, but nowadays they have EPP, and EPP is very flexible, and there's a lot of companies out there that sell EPP for new type airplanes, and I think it's important that the new flyer into the market has a little patience, doesn't go to the hobby store or online and see this big shiny $400 foam airplane and decide, hey, that's the one I'm going to learn on.
Oh, but Mike, it's so nice and shiny. I gotta have it. Come on, I gotta have that plane that's shiny and nice and goes fast. I just saw that guy fly it and it went so fast. I gotta have it. Oh man.
Well, exactly, and of course the guys at the store don't help out too much either. I mean, I love the local hobby shops are great. I totally support those guys when I can to go by their place and buy things, but it's very difficult because they're in the business to make money and they're in the business to sell what they have on their shelf.
Right.
It's a lot easier to sell what's on your shelf than to order something, because if a guy's going to order something, he can usually order it offline anyway. So if I walk into a hobby shop, I want something in my hands today. And E-Flight's really come a long way. They've put out a lot of good airplanes that are in EPP foam. Some of those T-28 Trojans and some of the other ones are at least on the verge of being a newbie airplane.
So what
they have the part.
So Mike, what style of aircraft do you think most new guys should get into? Because once again, a lot of guys want to start and they want a plane that has full control. I mean, ailerons, they have rudder, elevator, the whole lot. Maybe with flaps too. And a lot of times they say to people, all you need is three channel plane. You don't need to start out with a full boat for an aircraft. What's your thoughts?
Well, no, I agree with that. I mean, I agree because, as a new guy, you're not going to jump out there and start doing 3D stuff. And, I fly every week, usually with some new guys, and I've seen them kind of grow. But they all started with just flat profile EPP type airplanes. And, there's several companies out there that make those. And you can put it together relatively cheaply. I think the kits usually cost somewhere around $30 to $60, and you can buy a little motor through half a dozen websites, for $5 or $10. The most expensive part of the whole hobby is the radio.
Yeah, absolutely.
But even the radios, even nowadays, have come down to in the $100 range, where they used to be thousands of dollars. But the radio you can transfer from one airplane to the other, so that's only a single purchase. But the profile EPP airplanes, I think, lend themselves to, you want something that flies slow, you want something that has ailerons, but not necessarily you need to use them right away. I mean, you don't.
Right.
You can disassemble that channel and just fly with a rudder and elevator. And then if the airplane does hit the ground, it bends, it flexes. It doesn't come apart.
Right.
And if it does break, you can always use hot glue, or that's a little heavy, but you could always use some sort of a I don't know what the foam
Sure,
tack
foam tack
or
or a quick grip, any
yeah,
type
quick
of
grip.
flexible glue, and even the glues that sometimes come with the kits. They're like a contact cement, work very well. And then if you break out chunks, this is the nice part about EPP. If you were to break chunks out of it, you can use something, an expanding glue, like my favorite, your favorite, white Gorilla Glue, and
Oh
you throw
yeah,
that
I
on,
have like
throw some
a
water
bucket of
on
that
that,
stuff.
and then let it all foam out. Grab a hobby knife, shape it back, and you're good to go. And it works really well it works well with the EPP planes, and it doesn't weigh that much.
Yeah, I buy that stuff by the case.
Absolutely. Yeah, they see you coming. Oh, Mr. Moan, we got your monthly case right here for you.
Yeah, they just put it aside for me when I go out there. And the good news is you can get it at like Home Depot or Walmart or wherever,
Right,
your
any
local
store. No,
local
you don't have to
stores
go
are.
any specialty store.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, it's kind of funny. A lot of guys think that they have to go and buy all their supplies at the hobby store. And once again, I'm not saying not to shop at hobby stores, but I will say that stores that your wife shops at, Michael's, Joann's, you know, have all the glues that you may need right there. And
True.
like I said,
True.
and if you happen to be walking by Home Depot, like I said, the Gorilla Glue, Quick Grip, glues like that are in there. So it's amazing that you can get these things at other places than the hobby store. So it's okay to shop outside of those things.
Yeah, and if you want to make your flight that particular day very exciting, use CA glue on your EPP foam. Because about the time you get airborne, it'll come apart and parts will go everywhere. It makes it for a very exciting day. Trust me. I've seen it
No,
happen. That's the only reason.
I think we're
I've
going to
never
probably
done it,
have
but
to
I've seen
have
it happen.
I, I think we're going to have a podcast just to talk about glues and what to use them on and what not to use them on, because that there's a lot of stuff that goes on with a lot of beginner people who use the wrong glues for the wrong type of repairs or the builds. So
Yeah,
I
no,
think we're
I
definitely going to
agree.
have to address that in a future podcast.
Yeah, I'll have that written down for a podcast somewhere down the road. But yeah, I put that on our list. So, is there anything from a new guy's standpoint that he can do? Um, you know, because a lot of these guys buy stuff and they go out to the park. I've seen them. We stand on one side of the park. There's a little group of us that fly, and you'll always see that one guy way on the other side of the park, and he steps out and he's got this new thing. A new airplane. You can tell he's kind of new. I always try to go introduce myself, and since I'm the test pilot of the group, I always go out there and try to see if his setup is good. But can you think of anything, or would you suggest anything that they do to, kind of get better?
Well, I will say that for new people, it's maybe a human psychology thing with males, because the majority of guys who go out there are males, but it just seems to be a human reaction that they see a group of people who are doing a sport or a hobby, and they're a little fearful to go over and talk to those people. And the funny thing is, we're not a biker gang. You got to come up and show up with your tats, and you got to show them show them your medal when you walk up. I would say that.
Your group might
Well,
not be,
yeah,
but we
yeah,
are.
we do. Well, we have to fight with knives and fight bears up here, but um, it's just amazing that park flyers are the most friendliest people, regardless of where you go. Where they're helpful, and they want to talk to you about their planes. They don't care if you're a beginner. It's not like you go. In some sports you show up and you're a beginner, you're looked down on, and this is a sport that people have gone through that, and they've spent money, and they go, whoa, I don't want that guy to make that mistake. It's I could just tell him, and it's an easy thing for him to correct. So I guess for beginners, just be friendly. Go up, walk up to people, introduce yourself, tell people that you're a beginner, and people will get out of your way, or go out of their way to help you. So it's a great thing about the sport. I say a second thing that people could do to help them when they're new and getting into this. When I started, the very, very first time I started flying RC was about 20 years ago. And it took me about a month to build the plane. I put it all together, whittling pieces of logs and putting them together. And and by the time I got done, after my month, I had it all done and covered. It looked beautiful, and it was an overglorified power glider. And I started up the motor, threw it. It flew beautifully, just like it said in the box, beautifully for about 25 seconds going north, But the minute I turned it south to come back to me, well, of course the controls were reversed and I crashed it like within 3 seconds.
It's all over.
It was all over. It took me 2 weeks to put the plane back together, glue everything back together, whittle a couple of more logs, slapped it all back, got it back. Once again, another 30-second flight out. I turned it around. 3 seconds, it was in the ground, and I stopped the hobby. And then, about 20 years later, I tried it again, but this time there was a few other tools that were out there. One of the things that I got was a flight simulator. It was the best thing. It was better than a slice of bread. It really was. I was able to fly that, and it was nothing overly complicated. It was just a simple, bare bones one. But still, just the act of flying this thing in a simulator for a month. And then when I finally got my plane together and went out and flew, and for me, it was more I had to wait for the temperature to go up so I didn't freeze. So when it finally got nice enough for me to go outside, I was amazed that I actually flew it that 30 seconds down the field, turned it around, and flew it back. I was overjoyed. And then I was hooked after that. But it was that simulator of me putting in the hours in that sim that really amazed me what I can do. And for you especially, I was, since I started before you did, I mean, you put just like hours flying real plane, flying the sim, and, you're that much more advanced than I am just because you've been flying the simulator.
Well, I mean that was one of those things. A little quick story about that because you're right. After you kind of came down and visited and got me into the hobby again, I actually wound up picking up a sim, or I think you actually gave me one or sent one to me or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I started flying it around, and I did. I spent probably an hour a day on the simulator just to train my thumbs, fingers, how to hold the box, what to look for when the airplane came back. I did all these touch and go kind of, landings and takeoffs and flying it back, flying it towards me upside down, all trying to understand all the mechanics behind it. And, so then I go out and there's a club that was near the house, and I went out there, and of course I took my little Delta Wing Blue Core Foamy out there, and I asked everybody on the field, "Hey, you mind if I fly this here?" And one of the guys shows up, "Oh, that'll never fly." And of course, I was like, well, "Sure it will." And he actually asked me, "Well, how many times have you flown this thing?" And of course, it was fairly new, so I told him about 2 or 3 times, and he just shook his head like this is going to be a big accident. And of course, he asked me if he could help, and I said, "Sure. Why don't you launch it for me?" And so this thing weighed probably maybe 20 ounces, maybe. And so he
Right.
held it over his head like he was going to really chunk this thing as hard like a baseball. And of course, when he leaned back to toss it, I hit the full throttle, and it jumped out of his hands, went skyward. I did about 4 or 5 rolls, hovered it over his head, and then started flying up and down the field doing 20 miles an hour. He just kind of got this chagrin look on his face and goes, "You must have done this before." And I kind of laughed. And it was a great kind of introduction to these guys, because then they were all interested to see how the heck this thing actually flew, being very lightweight and made out of this blue core foam, which was fairly new at the time. And great bunch of guys. I got to know them. I actually became an instructor at that particular club back then, and it wasn't very long before they, started asking me to help out. So, but it was mostly attributed to the flight simulation that I was able to do. Now, I will tell you, today's flight simulator, I'm a big real flight fan. I spend probably an hour, maybe
Right.
at least an hour
It's night
a
and day
day.
compared to what it used to be and what's out there today. It really is.
Oh my gosh, the new real flight coming out. I mean, I know there's several out there. There's the Phoenix and a couple of the other ones, but the real flight simulator I bought way back when it first came out, like the 3.5 or whatever, and I've just kept up with it ever since. And I will tell you that out of all the flight simulators that I've tested, the real flight seems to have the best, closest resemblance to the real airplanes that I've, kind of experienced. And it's fun because, I know you have it and I have it. We can kind of fly together.
All right. Not only
computers and
is the
stuff.
flying fun, being able to fly yourself, but what I like about the flight simulator, the real flight that they have out now, is that you can actually fly with your buddies. You can call each other up and fly with each other. You can play games together. It's just totally different and new and fun and interactive that you can fly with your buddies, real time and play games, you know, doing RC stuff. I just find that fascinating and fun beyond belief.
Well, and the best thing is you can crash it a million times and it doesn't cost you anything.
Absolutely. That's the best thing right there.
Well, because I wound up having somewhere north of 40 some odd airplanes, and I would show up to the
Is that all?
to the park or to the club. Yeah, yeah, exactly right. That's all the ones I know about anyway. I still have a bunch in the boxes, but
That's true.
those are built. But yeah, I would show up and they were always looking at it like, gosh, how do you have all these airplanes, and how do you fly like that? And it just was the hours that I put in. So for a new guy that's out there, I always suggest that he get flight simulator, that he spend a little bit of time on the sticks just to teach his thumbs, fingers, his
Absolutely.
hands what to
Absolutely.
do, and it gives them that eye hand coordination to where they kind of understand it. I know the guys that I've kind of helped get up to speed. They've either done it via buddy box,
Right.
or they've done done it on the simulator. And the buddy box technology has come a long way as well. I mean, it used to be you had to stand next to the guy and take the box from him. Then it went to a cord. I remember those. I had a couple of cords that I would plug into guys when I was instructing them. And now it's all wireless.
Absolutely.
The Spectrum receivers
High
now,
tech.
holy smokes. It is high tech. And it talks to me.
That's the best part. Yeah. Right. Because I can't hear. So it's nice that it actually talks to me because I can't hear anymore.
Exactly. So it definitely makes for a much more exciting time at the field. So that's my suggestion anyway.
Well, like I said, you were talking about the buddy boxes. So one of the other things that people, beginners, don't do, besides, like I said, they either try to do it themselves, and I will say that this is a group activity type of hobby, and by that is you can do it by yourself, but it's always funner to fly with somebody or with good friends is nice, but like you have a group that's down there. It's kind of, it's not an official group. It's just a group of people who are out there. But I also suggest for beginners to join a group. And the nice part about joining a group is that they have dedicated instructors, and that's one thing, that to actually get somebody to help you and buddy box with you. You're less nervous. You don't have to worry about damaging your plane as much. You probably won't crash just because you have somebody else to take over for you. And if you join a group, the nice part is if you don't have a simulator, if you're on a tight budget, usually they have a simulator with that club that they'll loan you for new guys. They'll, be able to go out there, borrow the simulator, or even if you don't even have an airplane, a lot of times they will actually have student planes that when you come out there, you go out there and you'll be instructed on the beginner plane that the club actually owns. So that's a terrific thing. If you're not sure exactly what type of plane or things or equipment you need to get just yet, you can still learn how to fly and get a good step in the right direction.
I agree. I don't disagree with that. I think it's important, and I've been a member of several clubs. It's kind of fun to go out in the park on your own and just kind of fly. But yeah, you're right. The one thing that I know about the park guys that I fly with is what they use me for most of the time is they're pretty good at assembling the airplanes. Most people can follow directions and buy the right equipment. It's the setup, and they always say, "Hey, Mike, come over here and make sure this
Right.
thing." And they always want me to maiden their flight for them, which most of the time works out really well. I will tell you, I have had a couple where something happened and I crashed the guy's brand new airplane, which is just awful. I feel terrible about it. But I really do. But at the same time, it's just like, I mean, what can you do? I crashed a brand new glider the other day that poor guy spent all his time building and waited for me to get time to go do it, and then we lost a signal, and I'm not really sure where the disconnect went, but it was flying perfect. I did a perfect maiden flight. It flew a little nose heavy, and so we made a few adjustments back on the ground, and then we got it back into the air. It was gliding perfectly, little motor glider from flight, I think.
Right. And once again,
And the
about
radon, I think it was the
right, and
radon.
about the E-flight type planes, the nice part about the hobby now is, like I said, I had to whittle something out of wood and then, cover it, with cloth and all that kind of stuff and canvas. But nowadays, from E-flight, you can buy something, a UMX type aircraft, which is the name of the things. That means they're kind of small planes in the box with a little radio, a little toy radio that comes with it for under $150. And
Yeah, that's pretty
other
good deal.
than maybe setting it up a little bit, there's really nothing for that person to do. You just pull it out of the box and you can start flying it. And now the devices have flight controllers in them, meaning that they have some form of a stabilization on them, and it's just remarkable. So that even if a brand new beginner, you put the stabilization on, it's going to assist you. Now you can still crash it, but you have less of a chance to crash it with these type of systems in there. And the second thing is, you can get parts for these planes. Like I said, the one that I had to whittle out of wood, well, then I had to chop down a new tree. I have to go to the lumber yard. I gotta mill that thing down into a sheet that I can actually use. Nowadays, you run down to the hobby store, you spend $5, like your buddy who crashed the Radian. All he had to do is get a new fuselage. But within a week, he was back. He was back by that afternoon. Two or 3 days later, he was ready to fly. He just had to run down to the hobby store, get a new fuselage, transport all the servos from the old plane into the new plane, and he was ready to fly. Bada bing, bada boom. Nothing to it.
Yeah, I was the one, just to clarify, I was the one that crashed it, by the way.
Yes,
He didn't crash it. He's already flown it since then, by the way. Because the setup was the important part. We had it all set up. And I've seen some really crazy setups. I mean, guys that had the rudder backwards or the wrong ailerons or
absolutely.
And it's one of those things. You watch a guy and he tosses the airplane, hits the throttle, and the thing goes right into the ground, and he can't figure out what went wrong. And
well, let's talk about that for a moment. So this is another common beginner mistake, and that is they have their plane, they pulled it out of the box like I was just talking about. They turn on the radio, they move the controls, and then he just tosses the plane, and it abruptly smashes into the ground to a million pieces because he didn't do a flight check. And I'm here to tell you, folks, just like in a real aircraft, you want to walk around, kick the tires, move the control surfaces. On these little miniature aircraft, you have to do the same thing, because I will tell you, as many hours as I have building and putting these planes together and doing all this cool stuff, that I've gotten to the field, thought everything was perfect, and I said, let me do a range check, or not a range check, but let me do a flight check just to make sure. And I do a function check, and the ailerons are backwards, or the rudder's going the wrong way. Just because as I was fiddling with the radio, I flicked the knob or something, and I reversed something. It is amazing what you will catch with this, and it's just a good safety habit to get into. So another good reason, once again, for beginners to get with a group of people or a club is that you learn another second thing, which is safety, right? Because if you lose control and it smashes into somebody's car, guess what? Who has to pay for that? You.
Right.
So doing your safety checks.
That's true. I know that the AMA has a Park Flyer program, but a lot of people don't understand how that whole insurance thing works, and it just covers what your regular insurance won't cover.
Right.
So,
I would say that the insurance portion of it is mainly geared towards people under the age of 18 who don't have insurance, that they will come forward and help them. More so than you and I, who are older, who have homeowners insurance and stuff that we have to use first before the AMA insurance kicks in. And hopefully the accident that we have, when it gets that bad that our home insurance isn't covering it, man, I don't know what we did or what kind of jets we took down. We did something terribly has gone wrong. So
yeah, we're flying turbines in the park is what we're doing. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get it, and I agree with you as well. It's important because I think the radon crash, I think, had a lot to do with a range check. We should have done a range check. I didn't, because the guy that put it together, he was usually really, really good about setting it all up. I never really had to look, and I've made probably half a dozen of his airplanes, and they're always great builds. They fly perfectly. Everything about him. He gets a little nervous, tossing the airplane in the air for the first time, but he's getting better at it. And I think this time he, watching his new airplane go in, I think he's thought, okay, I'm I'm good enough pilot that I could probably maiden it myself and crash it myself. But we definitely learned a lesson, and everybody in the group, was like talking about range checks for the next week.
Right. Well, Murphy's law
So it is
says that
important.
it increases the more that you haven't done something. It definitely increases, and we've had enough accidents or incidents, not accidents, incidents that have happened to you and I, that have just because of that. We skip a step. We've done it a million times. Why would it happen now and then it happens now? I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's true. I think you and I had a reverse aileron situation at one
Oh,
time.
yep.
I think we did. And both of us looked at this thing and said, "Oh yeah, it's good to go," and it was moving backwards the whole time. It wasn't until after the incident of it laying in a million pieces on the ground that we looked at each other and were like, "Are those ailerons going backwards? I guess they are."
Well,
It's always
yeah,
terrible,
and it's just one of those things. Oh, I thought you were moving them the right way. It's just
right?
amazing. Two people looking at something, we miss something that simple. So, um,
Yeah, it happens though. I mean, you get a lot of brains in the way.
yeah, that's definitely true there, Mike.
I've done this a million times. It's trust me, trust me. Yeah, that's usually when it all starts to go wrong.
Horribly, horribly wrong. So,
Yeah, absolutely. No. Well, it's a good topic to discuss. The new pilots. We've had a couple join our group, and it's always exciting to see
more ways than
guys
one.
come in.
Running, get diving out of the way.
Yeah, not so much. My group has a walk of shame. Where if you most of the time I land like right at my feet, but with the new guys, they're always landing way downfield, and so they're having to walk to retrieve their airplanes. And it's kind of funny to. I mean, you've been down here and
Right.
flown with our group, and you can kind of see that we poke fun of each other for this walk of shame, and the little email that goes out every week. We talk about who had to make the walk of shame and who didn't. So I try to stay off that list as often as I can. Once in a while, my battery gets a little low and I have to go retrieve it, but for the most part, I can
Well, you're the guy
get
they
it
love
back.
to hate, right? They love you as
Exactly,
an
I think
instructor,
so.
but they're just praying that you're going to land out in the field so they can catcall you when you walk out there. It's actually quite embarrassing. I'm just like they're like seething at the mouth. Just he landed far away, a foot away, or he had to walk a couple of meters. Oh, let him have it. I'm like, wow.
Well, at first it was 30 or 40 feet. I had to, the guy that had to walk 30 or 40 feet. And for me, it's like 8 feet.
Yes.
If I have to walk more than 10 feet, it's just, oh my gosh, it's terrible. Mike had to do the walk of shame, all 10 feet of it, and I'm like, man, I could almost like just hop the airplane over from 10 feet. And I'm not, halfway across the park. I'm just like
Nope.
10 feet
No,
away from it. But
like I said,
yeah,
you're the guy they love to hate. So
yeah, they love it when I'm there though. They're all the time asking when I'm coming out. So
well, you're going out tomorrow,
it's
right?
kind of
Tomorrow's
fun.
Tuesday, right?
I am. It's a Tuesday, and I am going to go out there tomorrow. I'm taking. I have a cracked Turbo Beaver from Twisted Hobbies. It's an awesome airplane. Um, it does great. I love flying Twisted Hobby stuff. It's EPP. It's super lightweight. I fly it off of a two cell 450. It's got a little bitty. I think it's maybe a 1500 motor on it. I've got it set up to where the flaps work as ailerons and flaperons and spoilers. It is just an incredibly fun airplane to fly. And since we're in a park and we're on the grass, and I can just run it around and fly low and drag the tail and do 3D stuff with it. The guys love to watch me fly.
Right, and
It's
especially
just so much fun.
it's a 3D style aircraft, and flying it low to the ground, you don't have to worry if you hit the ground. And I've seen you hit the ground often. And once again, since it's EPP, you blow off the dust, or you may have to fix a crack, with some glue, zip zip, and you're back up in the air again. It's wonderful.
Yeah, the good thing about it, if you watch some of their videos, they do a really good job of telling you how to strengthen some of the hinges to where they don't tear and rip, and so if you do bounce it across the ground, then it's not totally destroyed. So Blenderm is my friend. I buy that stuff by the case as well, and all my EPP airplanes have a Blenderm hinge, or they have something that will keep it from tearing. So I usually cut a little piece of Blenderm and I put like welder's glue or some kind of a contact cement on it, and it hardens up and it gives a little stiffness and it won't tear. So
Excellent.
obviously that'll be in the glue section of our podcast when we get to that. But it is a fun airplane. I suggest that if you had the funds and the wherewithal to go get it, and you've been flying for a little bit, that it's a great airplane to take out to the park, and it fits in the truck pretty easily, and I can pretty much take it anywhere.
Right. And so there's a couple of companies that make some good EPP planes. I just bought one on a 3D aircraft myself. It's called the Laser. It's 32 inches. I got it from a company called Value Hobbies, and I think it was a whopping $25 for this thing. And it's not quite the quality of Twisted Hobbies, but it is a great basher plane. It is a great basher plane to just do some 3D training on, to fly, do things that you normally wouldn't do. And if you break it, smash it, catch it on fire, whatever you're doing, well, it was only $25. You could buy half a dozen of them and, just have them like Schroeder and from the Peanuts in his closet and just pull one out and go, wreck one and go out and grab another one and fly it. Also, for when we were talking beginner planes, once again, Hobby King has a wide range of beginner planes in their arsenal. One of them is the Tough Trainer. It's a high wing type style plane. I think it's one of those that you can configure either 4-channel or 3-channel. Once again, it's all EPP construction. I think it might have a plywood center or fuselage wrapped with the EPP for at least for your battery and stuff and for your firewall. But the rest of it's all EPP. I've heard nothing but good things about it. So once again, I want to say they have maybe about 4 planes that are beginner planes that, of different sizes that you could probably configure and use there. So I can't think of the other ones off the top of my head, but the Tough Trainer for sure from them, I know I've heard good things about.
So Jay, I had an opportunity to go out to the field and talk to some of the other flyers. So let's hear what they have to say.
Sounds good, Mike. Let's do it.
Tell me your name.
I'm Phil.
Okay, and how long have you been flying?
About 3 years.
3 years. And what was your first airplane?
My first airplane was EPP Trainer, and EPP is the way to go for starters because you build them, you fly them, you crash them, and you can fix them. Yeah. And EPP is really easy to fix.
What do you remember? What type of or what the brand name was? Or?
It was from Foamy. I forget. What was it? Foamy Flyers or RC Foam or something. It was a plane with a good dihedral. That also helps too because it corrects itself. Right. It'll right itself in the air.
Now, did you do any buddy boxing or fly with?
I did a little bit of buddy boxing. Yeah, that helped to start, and I had some good experts help me build the plane and make sure it was straight. But flying it takes a lot of crashes. You have to get past a lot of crashes until you're somewhat confident. And
so was the EPP easy to fix?
EPP is really easy to fix. There's all kinds of different glues that you can use in it. It maintains its structure. When it tears. And
so if you had to do it all over again, would you do anything different?
No, I would just start with cheap as possible EPP plane, maybe a larger wingspan, so it's more stable in the air and just get used to it.
Yeah. What are you flying now?
So now I have a Hacker Super Zoom. This Hacker, it's also EPP, and I've crashed it a couple times. It's ended up in multiple pieces, but you can glue it back and it looks like new. And it's a real stable plane. It has a large wingspan. And
do you think you'll ever move to outside of the EPP, or are you still?
Yeah, well, I have a couple of EPO planes that I've flown, and I've crashed those too. And
how do they
those aren't nearly as easy to fix. Sometimes you have to buy new parts. Sometimes you have to reshape some of the foam or use spackle. And I've built some Depron park flyer jets. Those are really good. And Depron is pretty good foam too, but unfortunately, I think is disappearing from the U.S. market. But these park jets are pretty easy to fly too, and a lot of fun, and they look like real jets. They're super fast.
Okay.
So those are good.
Oh, good. Well, do you have any advice for the new guy just getting started?
Uh, Again, I would start with definitely go with the EPP plane because new guys are going to crash a bunch of times, and the EPP are relatively inexpensive and easy to fix.
So it sounds like Phil has got some pretty good experience in flying EPP type airplanes, as well as some Depron airplanes.
Well, I definitely have to say that Phil is a lucky guy, or at least he's a smart guy. I mean, he's only been flying for 3 years. He set himself up for success. He sounds like he tried to get as much stick time as he possibly could. So by flying with EPP, right? He knew that he was going to crash. He crashed a lot, it sounded like. He was able to repair his plane and still get back out there, not be, as you've probably seen with a lot of new guys, they'll get their shiny plane, crash it once, and then they want to throw it away and not never touch the hobby again.
Well, they get somewhat intimidated, I think, when they fly. But I've actually seen and flown some of Phil's airplanes, and they're awesome. I mean, he's a great builder. He has crashed. I've seen airplanes actually break in half, or at least the nose come off of it. And luckily, with the EPP, like we've talked about before, you can glue it right back together. A little bit of welder's glue or quick grip or whatever it is, and we can just put that back together, and he's back in the air in just a matter of a few days of repair.
Right. And from his mistakes, and I liked when you asked him if he'd do it again, what would he change? And one of the things was get a bigger plane. And it doesn't have to be gigantic, of course, but by getting a bigger plane, it's easier to see. It tends to fly slower relative to your environment. You know what I mean? The smaller plane, because it's so small, it seems to go faster than a larger plane, going by. So, and of course, it's not as twitchy, doesn't get affected by the wind as much. So I like to hear things like that from individuals because, of course, when they go out to help other people, they can give that advice. So.
Yeah, and the dehedral was important as well because having a new airplane with a good dehedral, it really is kind of not really a self-righting type airplane, but it does have a tendency to be a little more stable in the air. A lot of the flat profile foamies won't have any dihedral in them, but you can find a high wing trainer that might have a little bit of it to help you, stay aloft and have a good glide ratio and fly a little bit slower.
Oh, absolutely. And another thing that I was just thinking about was a thing that I noticed with most new pilots. They crank on the stick like it's nobody's business. Like they're a fighter jock and they're fighting, 12 MiGs in the air. And really, you barely have to touch the stick with just one finger. Less is more. And they will over control the plane, and that dehedral will, not like you said, it won't totally save you, but it will self-right or help you along. So the less you do, the more the plane just flies itself.
That's true. Or I hear him fly like this.
The good old Tennessee twang. I know that sound.
It is the twang. I've heard that many times.
Yes, I can play a mean tune myself.
Even from you, actually.
Oh, you better believe it. And you remind me of it every time I fly with you.
Well, and what that is people, they grab the sticks and then as they start to move one way or the other, they let go of it, and it has a spring on the inside of the radio and it self-centers. And you should never let go of the stick. You're constantly in control of it, whether you're using your thumbs or your thumb and your forefinger. And you should move the airplane in a very slow, very methodical way. And I think that's hard for some guys to do. They'll start moving and it'll slip out, or they'll let go of it because they think it'll right itself. And sometimes that can be detrimental. But you really don't know you're doing it until it actually happens.
Right, and that's another beautiful thing by flying with other people, flying with more experienced people. They can help point out bad habits that you have. I've been flying for, how long have we been flying for? 10 years, 12 years, 13 years?
More than
like
that. Yeah, I think it's closer to 15 to 18
Okay,
years, somewhere
15.
around
It
there.
seems like it was just 3, 4 myself, but
Well, I know on the website I put that we have over 35 years of combined experience. So however you want to divide that up, it's about how long we've been doing
wow.
it.
Recently, when I came down, flew with you at the Electric Festival in Arizona, you would point out to me that I was making that twangy sound,
Yeah.
and that was like the first time. And he, it's a great thing that you told me that because now I'm self-conscious of it, and I not do it as much. I still do it, but I keep reminding myself by saying right in back of you, stop playing that guitar and fly the plane.
Right.
So that stuck with me.
Yeah. Well, it's good.
So who else?
What's that?
Oh, I was going to say, who else did you get to speak to out at the field?
Well, we got to talk to Tom, and we can listen to what he had to say, and
Sure.
we'll we can discuss that.
My name is Tom. Well, my first airplane was a Yak. I think it was a Yak 55. And I actually learned on a buddy box with my buddy Jim as the co-pilot, or actually the pilot, and I was a co-pilot, so it was really great. Whenever I started to crash, he'd say, "I've got it." And then he would have control of the airplane. And the nice thing about the Yak is it's very easy to repair. It's made out of foam, so you can crash it, just EPP foam, yeah. So you can crash it, and it comes back with a little glue. And I remember the first probably 20 flights, probably broke a prop on every one of those flights and had some sort of repair on every one of those flights. But the Yak just kept on, took a beating and kept on coming back for more.
Good. If you had to do it all over again, what would you do? The same thing? Would you do something different?
Absolutely the same thing. You got to go with something very easy to fly, and you have to fly with people that are experienced.
So it seems that Tom had his Yak 55. It was EPP. I love the fact that he said he crashed it a bunch of times and it bounced back, and he was able to repair it fairly easy.
Yeah, it was really surprising because you don't really think of a Yak as being a trainer type plane or something for a beginner, but he was able to make it work because he had somebody who buddy boxed with him, and that is really key for helping someone learn to fly, I think.
Well, I agree. I mean, and we talked about that earlier in the podcast where we talked about the buddy box systems have gotten so much better. They've gone from standing behind them to a wired one to a wireless. Buddy boxing and flying with people with experience is very, very important. This is a very tough sport to learn on your own, and unless you have someone with experience or a buddy box or a simulator, it can be very disheartening to go out. Toss an airplane in the air after spending $200 and $300 on it, and watch it, disintegrate into just a big foam pile.
Yeah, and you didn't even talk about the Murphy effect, which is you could buy a plane that can self-level, have a autopilot, the whole 9 yards, and spend $500 on this super system, and go out and maybe there was a screw loose, or maybe something wasn't glued, but you didn't have the experience to look for such a thing, or you didn't, go over a checklist on your plane, and you go out there and you throw it and the thing falls apart, or a key element falls apart, So, yeah.
I agree. I mean, it's these things unfortunately are mass made. Most of the airplanes nowadays, you're not building it yourself. You're buying it as a ARF or almost ready to fly kit. And if you're new, you're right. You don't know to check some of the glue hinges or the servos to make sure they're in. I don't know how many times I've had new airplanes come in where the gear popped out or the flap fell off or something that was just really simple, but it was just a matter of putting it all together, working all the controls, testing it, kind of pulling a little bit to make sure things are secure. And sure enough, out comes the gear in my hand, and I have to re-glue it because the glue, which we're going to have a whole new podcast on, didn't hold. And so, those are good things when you're flying with other people. You can have them look it over, you can have them check it out, and you can have them look at your setup and make sure that it's ready to go.
Yeah, having a second set of eyes go over your equipment and double check or triple check something, hey, it may be kind of annoying for some guys, but it's going to save you a lot of money in the end run. I mean, once again, we have a lot of experience, but how many times have you said something or I said something and the other member goes, yeah, it's good or something, and then they throw the plane and they go, it's not flying right. And sure enough, the thing that you mentioned or I mentioned was the thing that happened, that we didn't check that one nut or bolt or didn't double check something or range check something.
It's happened to you and me several times. So I mean, it's not. It doesn't. It doesn't just happen to the new guys. Trust me.
Oh yeah.
You know, those of us with a combined, flying experience, we do run into stupid things like that as well.
And the worst part about that is now that we're more experienced, our models are much more expensive than they were when we first started out.
That is true. Very, very true. It's. I have several models that have well over $1,000. I can't believe I admit that, but yeah, there's several of them that have well into the $1,000 mark. So they do get more expensive, but your skill level gets increases, and I think it's important for someone that's getting into the sport to look at realistic aircraft. Don't get the pie in the sky and the gleam in your eye that says, oh my gosh, I really got to have this EDF F-22 and then go out and then crash it because you spent a lot of money, and obviously you get disheartened at the end. So I think sticking with something simple. Phil mentioned that he had a Hacker. That is a great airplane. It's got a larger wingspan. It is very stable. I love flying that airplane. Airplane is so much fun to fly. It flies slow. It's very responsive. If you know how to program the radio or have someone help you program the radio, you can get it to just roll like a drill. The thing just has an incredible roll rate, or you can get it to be very, very slow and a roll rate.
Right. Get it slow, then you can fly it low right in front of you. That's a lot of fun.
It is incredibly amount of fun, and it's great. Roll it upside down, drag the tail, do some 3D stuff. But if you can't do all that stuff, it's fun just flying it around in a pattern. But I would suggest do that. Learn to fly in a pattern. Don't just go up there and yank the sticks around and watch what happens. A buddy box with someone. Fly a simulator. That's got to be most important, I think, is flying a simulator, and then just have fun. I think that's the big part. Is just go out there and have fun, and relax, and don't try to over control it. Stick with the EPP. It's easy to fix, and stay away from the EPS. That's the EPS foam, which is beer cooler foam. That stuff goes it goes everywhere. I've had plenty of those airplanes, and they are very tough to collect all your parts once it hits the ground.
And if it's windy, yeah, it just blows.
If it's windy, yes, it blows your parts all over the place.
Well, Mike, I think once again, because we're predominantly men in this particular sport, men come with their egos sometimes, especially with their toys, whether you're golfing and you want to get the premium golf clubs or putter, and spend all that money. Once again, the beginners, when they come in this, they see those shiny, Mustang, P-51 Mustang or some other warbird out there, and they want to have it, or the super fast jet, goes 100 miles an hour. But really, you need to come in with something very ugly, ugly stepsister of some form of a plane. And that way it looks ugly. You don't care what happens to it. If you damage it first time out, you don't feel so bad as that model that you spent 5 hours polishing, and then it lands without landing gear and scrapes it all up, or on the maiden, crashes.
Right.
So, EPP, that ugly little stepsister. You don't mind dating her.
Speaking of ugly, I think that the slow stick is probably a good starter plane too. I actually had one. I still have one. It's a different color. My first one was red, and I used to go fly it around in at the high school track, and I would fly through the goalpost. I'd fly underneath the goalpost and then climb up, fly over the goalpost and through the goalpost. But it was just a 2-channel. Basically had an elevator and a rudder and a throttle. I guess a 3-channel.
And it was a stick and some foam. That's what it was.
It was a stick and a foam and some rubber bands. And my original one had a brush motor on it, so it was just uber slow. I mean, it was just so floaty. You could chop the throttle, and that thing would just come just gliding down, and it had these silly spring gear on there, and it would just kind of bounce along. And I probably crashed that thing more than once, but luckily the rubber bands just came off, and a little bit of CA glue on that foam, and I was back in the air in a matter of minutes. So I always kept a bottle of CA glue and some kicker in my pocket when I went out to the field. So
Absolutely. That's one of the things we're probably going to have to talk about in another podcast as to what gear to build up and what things to take with you to the field. Because it's amazing how I started out and where I am now.
that's true. It is a good idea to do that. We can talk about that in a later podcast.
So, was there anybody else at the field that had any interesting factoids or interesting points?
It was a quick day for us, so most of the time I was only able to talk to Tom and Phil, but we'll get back out to the field and try to interview some other guys out there. We do have a pretty eclectic group. They're interesting guys. We have quad guys, several guys out there that fly quads. One of them actually holds a Guinness Book of World Record for the longest quad.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. We'll do a podcast on those guys, but they're for being relatively new, I shouldn't say they're newbies because they fly really well and they've had some really good instruction. But at the, considering there are those of us that have flown 15, 20, 30 years in the sport, they are relatively new. But they all fly EPP airplanes. I know that Phil talked about the park jets. Those things are a riot. He has built several park jets out of Depron foam, and I've had the pleasure of maiden in those things, and they just fly fantastic. And most of the plans are downloadable from the internet. And we always talk about the new guy going out to the hobby store and buying a new airplane and buying something out of a box, but you don't really have to do that. You can actually get started like I did. Cut out the side of a foam box. And use a plan off the internet or go to Michael's and buy the foam board like we talked about. It's a great sport in the fact that you can find inexpensive parts and you can build it yourself and not spend a whole lot of money on the actual aircraft, but get yourself a quality radio.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's another thing people don't realize is that depending on whether you're rich or poor, this is really a sport that you can get into now, meaning this, 2016, that you can get in now with not a lot of money. Radios used to cost, a computer radio used to cost, hundreds of dollars when we started, and now you can get one for $50. Now you can get batteries for $10, $5. It's amazing just how much the sport has taken off and the opportunities that they afford to bring in new users and inexpensively, or kids. And I just hope we can help spread the word and get more people out and flying.
Yeah, it is important. I always enjoy when there's somebody new that comes out to the park or somebody that stops by, and the kids are all excited. They want to see me fly, and or not just me, but the other guys at the park. They want to see everybody flying, and then they kind of get that gleam in their eye, like, oh man, I want one of these for Christmas. And hopefully, mom and dad will go out and get them something and then bring them out to the park. And then guys like me can buddy box with them and teach them how to fly. I've seen it happen, grandpas and dads go out there with their kids and it's a good bonding.
It is. It is.
They make for great Christmas gifts too, but I would get a quality radio. We should probably have a podcast on our radios as well.
I think we're going to have
touch
to
base with that. I think for now, that'll probably cover everything that we need to talk about from the new guys. Feel free to email us at the parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com. And for those of you out there that have any suggestions or comments, feel free to give us a ring.
So I guess we're going to be signing off, saying goodbye, Jay and the AK. Until next time.
And this is Michael. Until next time, have a great one, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please feel free to email your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.